To reduce fractions, you want to divide out a common divisor. 8 and 12. Those both divide by 4. When you reduce fractions, you're actually making an equivalent fraction. 2/3 is actually the same number as 8/12. They're both equal to about 0.6666 repeating. For example, if you had a pie, you cut it into 12 pieces and ate 8 of those pieces, that'd be the same thing as cutting the pie into 3 pieces and eating 2. Also, you don't have to find the biggest number to divide out, in our case the 4. If you divided out a 2 and reduced to 4/6, and then divided out another 2 and reduced to 2/3, that would also work. Another thing to note, 8/12, the numerator is smaller than the denominator. That means you're going to have a number less than 1. When you get a number like this, an improper fraction, 9/6, you're going to have a number greater than 1. 9 and 6, what number divides out evenly? 3. 3/2, or 1 1/2. We usually keep it as a reduced improper fraction. 60 divided by 240. I see that both end in a 0. Therefore, if I divide out a 10 from both top and bottom, that will take away my 0. So I'll have 6/24. Both of these divide by 2 because they're even. I also see actually that 6 divides into both of these. So I'll divide both top and bottom by 6 and get 1/4. 8/2. There are 2 ways to do this problem. I'll show you how to do it by doing the reducing method that we've been using. 2 is a common factor, so I can divide both top and bottom by 2, giving me 4/1. Anytime a fraction has a denominator of 1, it's just the number 4. 4 and 4/1 are the same thing. We could also think of this as a division problem. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Notice that since the numerator is larger than the denominator, the answer turns out to be greater than 1. I wanted to add in this problem 2/8. 2/8 and 8/2 look similar, but since this is an improper fraction, your answer will be greater than 1. 2/8, that is going to reduce to a number that is smaller than 1. Again, it's a very similar method. Both numbers have a factor of 2. And you see that your answers are actually reciprocals of each other. But they're very different numbers. You couldn't switch these answers. Change to a decimal. I would allow you to use a calculator on problems like this, and it just becomes a calculator problem. When you do this on a calculator, you would do 3 divided by 11. Top divided by bottom. And you get 0.272727. Since the 27 repeats, we put a bar over it. That's like a repeating bar. Notice 3/11, the numerator is smaller than the denominator. You get a number that's less than 1. If you wanted to do this by hand, you could. The 3, that's the number that's getting divided, so that number would go under the house. And you would divide it by 11. That's the problem that you would do. Add enough zeros so you can see what happens at the end. 9/8. On a calculator, 9 divided by 8. You get 1.125, 1 1/8. Again, notice since it's an improper fraction, our answer is larger than 1. Again, if you wanted to do this by hand, the 9 is the number that's being divided, so that's the number that will go under the house. 9 divided by 8. Some problems I have memorized. For example, 1/2, I know that that's 0.5. But again, if you divided that in your calculator, 1 divided by 2, you'd get 0.5. 12 divided by 2, I don't even need my calculator for that one, it's 6. Again, notice 12 divided by 2, that's going to be a number bigger than 1. It's an improper fraction. It's going to be a number larger than 1. Contrast that with 2/12. It's reciprocal. In that case, the numerator is smaller than the denominator. It's going to be a number less than 1. When I take 2 divided by 12, I get 0.16, repeating, 1/6. Adding and subtracting fractions. Remember the rules for adding and subtracting fractions. You have to have a common denominator, and you do tops only. So finding the common denominator. I want a number that both 4 and 6 divide into evenly. A good one to check, just do 4 times 6, 24. That will always work. But sometimes once I find that, I say, is there anything smaller that will work? Then my numbers stay smaller. And there is 12. Both 4 and 6 divide evenly into 12. Then I want to unreduce. I want to find the equivalent fraction, 3/4. What would that be in 12ths? I use my denominator as a clue. How do I turn a 4 into a 12? By multiplying by 3. Therefore, I'm going to multiply by 3 in the numerator as well. So I get 9. 9/12 and 3/4 are equivalent fractions. How does 6 get turned into 12? By multiplying by 2. 1/6 and 2/12 are equivalent fractions. If you reduce 2/12, you'd get 1/6. Now look at the sign. Ours is positive, addition. Then tops only. 9 plus 2 is 11. 11/12. That does not reduce. That's my answer. -1/2 minus 5/7. Common denominator. One that will always work is 2 times 7, 14. Is there anything smaller that will work? No. How do we turn 1/2 into something 14ths? You might know that it's 7/14. 1/2 is the same as 7/14. Otherwise, how do you use your denominator as a clue? How do you turn 2 into 14? By multiplying by 7. Do the same thing on the top. How do you turn 7 into 14? By multiplying by 2. Now put your signs back in. The first fraction was negative, and the second fraction had a negative in front of it, or a minus. Notice that I put the signs with the tops. That's because we're using tops only when we do adding or subtracting fractions. So now think money. -7 minus 10. You're $7 in the hole, and you lose 10 more dollars. You're now 17 in the hole. -17 over 14. Does that reduce? Well, they're not even, so 2 won't come out. 3 won't come out. 5 won't come out. 17 actually is a prime number. That means it doesn't divide by anything except 1 in itself. So this is already reduced. I like my answers kept as reduced improper fractions. Another correct way of writing this would be -1 and 3/14. Common denominator for 8 and 6. One option is 48. 8 times 6. That will work. Is there anything smaller? 24. Next, put in your signs. This was positive. Now adding a negative. Adding the negative is the same as subtracting, so I'm just going to put a subtraction sign in there. Now tops only. 21 minus 20 is 1. Keep your denominator the same. 1/24. Get a common denominator. 9 times 5 will work. 45. Is there anything smaller that will work? No. Unreduce 8/9 into 45ths. Use your denominator as a clue. How does 9 get turned into 45? By multiplying by 5. So multiply the top by 5 as well. Again, I'm just unreducing. I'm making an equivalent fraction. If I took 40/45ths and reduced it, I would get 8/9. They're equivalent fractions. Tops only. 58/45. That is reduced. Common denominator. 24 would work. 12 is another number that will work. I like to use the smallest number I can find because it means less reducing for me in the end. Notice I brought my signs down with me. Now do tops only. -10 plus 9. Think money. You're $10 in the hole. You win back 9, so you're still 1 in the hole. -1/12. I kept the negative sign with the numerator. It would also be correct to have the negative sign out in front of the whole fraction. Multiplying fractions is different rules. You do not need a common denominator, and you do both tops and bottoms. I use my song. Multiplying fractions, it's no problem. First you do the top, then you do the bottom. 5 times 2 is 10. 8 times 3 is 24. I do straight across, no cross multiplying here. Then let's think about the sign. I have a negative times a positive, so my sign will be negative. I must reduce. I see that they're both even, so I can divide a 2 out. So I get -5/12. When you divide a fraction, the rule is that you flip the second fraction and you multiply. My hint is to always write it out. It reduces mistakes. A negative divided by a negative will be a positive, so my answer will be positive, and then I just multiply straight across. 3 times 2 is 6. 10 times 9 is 90. And then reduce. I can divide a 2 out of both top and bottom. And I can divide a 3 out of both top and bottom. When I'm reducing, I often look for 2's and 3's. Because 2's and 3's will take care of 4's, 6's, 9's if you just keep doing 2's and 3's. You can look for those bigger numbers as well, but looking for 2's and 3's and 5's will always work. My answer is 1/15. One thing to note, when you're doing problems like this, working with fractions, your multiplication tables become very important. You should, if you're not good with your multiplication tables, you should practice them. Get an app on your phone that practices multiplication tables. It makes common denominators, reducing a lot easier.